So the question is, what is the dimension and in which dimension are we in? A dimension for me, it's space, if you want to think about that. It's difficult to bring these things into the human relations. So the dimension is a specific set of laws. So, for example, when we talk about the third dimension, which is cubical space, it means that there is a specific way of understanding it, and this is the constraints of the length, of, how do we call the other, width, and then of the height. So these three laws, or these three rules, let's say, create the dimension. If you take one out, you're going back into the two dimensions. So if you take the height out, you're in the second dimension, which is the surface. It's creating a surface. So by adding one more component, which is the height, you're going from the surface, which is the second dimension, to the cubical space, which is the third dimension. Equally, if you start adding more constraints into it, you're moving into the different dimensions. So the fourth dimension, for example, is time. So into the space, you're putting one more law, one more dynamic, which is called time, and then you're moving into the space-time dimension. So that means that the space, it's only the way it is for this specific millisecond or millimoment, and then just keep changing every time the time is changing. So accordingly, all the dimensions have one more constraint that completely changes the way that they exist. And this is the way we can think about dimensions. So it's a set of rules, practically, that are creating a specific reality. All these words are funny to use in the dimensions, but that's what it is for me. Difficult to say in which dimension we are. It really depends on your access points, and this is very personal for people. It's also personal because it can change with human relations. So which dimension you can tap in. So for example, I have a friend who can freeze time, and she didn't know it happened the first time we were together, and we both realized it. So it was obvious beyond her. So she brought me into a condition that I was not able to tap in alone. So physically, we are in the four dimensions. So we're in the dimension of cubical space. We have like matter, and it's 3D, it's not 2D. We're not a sticker on the wall, so we are 3D. And we also understand time. So we understand that in every second we are different because time is moving. We understand that as the universe is moving in a spiral and expanding itself, there is no single moment that is the same. So we understand time also. So for sure we are in the four dimensions. And all the rest of the dimensions are practically according to us. So it really depends on the state of the person. So our physicality is in the three dimensions. Our essence is in the fourth dimension also, and depends on the person. We can tap into more dimensions than that. We don't know how many dimensions exist. We have proven that science has proven that there exist 10 dimensions, but right now they're talking maybe for 2 or 3 times more than that. So we don't really know how many dimensions exist, but it's also, we have to really understand that the more the dimension, the more we are raising the number of dimension, the more we are raising the complexity. So our human brains have limitation in understanding things. So if we get into a very high complexity, we're also not able to grasp it. So even if the dimension exists, we are not able to understand it. So by now we know about 10, with 10 being the higher dimension, which is infinite possibilities. And me personally, I cannot think what can it be after that? So if in that dimension everything is possible in every millisecond of time, in all other dimensions, so from physicality to essence to everything, it's everything possible, I cannot really think what would be the next step. So that's what we know for now, and it will be very interesting to see the next step. One of the next steps that can be considered next step is the multiverse. So they say that we are not living in one universe, we are living in a bubble that is part of the infinite number of bubbles which are other universes. So our infinite is just one bubble of the many infinites floating around the world. And I think this one can really extrapolate to how many dimensions exist. Because imagine if in our micro bubble exist infinite possibilities and even maybe more dimensions. In every bubble exists similar or even more. Imagine how that magnifies, right? So it really goes to as far as you want to take it.